In the Rocket League community, Endpoint is legendary for one thing. Well, a few things, but one thing is that we were known for the bootcamp buffs. We were one of the first teams to take boot camps at every single regional and actually win 2 regionals for that. We literally got to every single major, we got to the World Championships, we were the number 1 team in Europe, and we were doing boot camps every single event. Even one time, our internet went down on a Sunday or a Saturday, just before Championship Sunday, and we had to ship everyone over to my house in a little flat, and we got everyone around the table, and we still came second in that event. That actually points out one red flag of a boot camp, is that occasion we only had one internet, and it went down. So that's one of the red flags straight away, is that you should always have a backup line for your internet. I do some videos on Esports Masterclasses. We talk about all different areas of the industry in terms of what, if you'd like to get a job in the industry, what niches to go into, what you're interested in, or if you just like to hear about the behind the scenes of what goes on. Well, today we're talking about bootcamp. We run the largest esports facility in the UK for bootcamps, and today we're going to discuss how they run. So let's start with what is a bootcamp. So what is a bootcamp? Right, so let's bring this down again. So there's a few points here. It's essentially an intense training block, we'll call it, where a team will come to us, they'll stay with us for any time between 3 days, maybe as the minimum. We generally don't take bookings for less than that, but let's say a 3-day boot camp all the way to, we've got a team staying with us pretty much the whole year. But it generally, I'd say the medium is a week to 2 weeks is where a team would stay with us. Often you would do that for the pure reason of you're either going on to a major event, so you're training together in an intense situation to then go to a major $1 million event, or the other scenario is often that you've got a European online event, it could be a $1 million event in Dota, Rocket League, anything like that, it could be online, and you want the best talent in Europe, so they have to fly over and they play with us in Europe basically for ping and latency. So intense block, how long do they last? Yeah, 3 days to months. And then we've also got, basically the reason for them is to live and breathe the game. So yeah, live and breathe the game. If you think about this analogy, that a professional team in esports, they might have a player that's in Denmark, they might have a player in France, they might have a player in the UK, Serbia, any of these kind of countries, and they play online together. But this is essentially bring them all together in the same room for team bonding, for all sorts. So why do teams do that? Brings us on to why do teams do this? So why do teams want to boot camp? Right, so chemistry, it's a huge one. I think strategy games like Counter-Strike, Rocket League, everything, League of Legends, Dota, is so important for the team to be gelled together and understanding what's going on, all the strategies. It's so much easier to do that in person and do that. So chemistry is a huge one. And actually, I find that teams with bootcamp, as I said in the intro, have such an advantage over others. So what else? So we've got no home distractions. I think this is actually quite a big one. So you don't know what's going on in people's lives. Professionals are professional for a reason, and they have that, they separate that. But this also allows them to just get away from everything, and you are literally, again, chemistry in an environment. You live and breathe the game, and you do have no home distractions. So if you've got really important events coming up, it's time to practice. And also, I think a big one is content as well. So one of the issues we had over the years in the esports organization when we didn't have a facility is that you feel like you're repurposing the same content all the time. You haven't got in-person shots, especially when you're a bit more grassroots than tier one. If you're at a major event every single week, it's easier. But if you're not, especially in some of the game titles that only have some major events a couple of times a year, getting that content bank is really important. Because if you think about how an organization makes money, one of the biggest ticket items is sponsorships. Sponsorships need media, and you need to essentially be creating content. That's also why we built a media studio here at the bootcamp. It allows us to do content with professional players when they come in and get that content for the sponsors that they need as well, which can be hard when if you've got, say, a Brazilian team coming to stay with us and their whole team is out in Brazil as well, then it makes sense for them to hire us to do the media for them, because it's a lot cheaper than sending a bunch of people over, accommodation, flights and everything as well to do the content. And we can turn it around pretty quickly as well. So what's the costs? Let's bring it up here and say, what's the costs of a boot camp? Because this is probably not known by a lot of people. So what do you have to factor in? So we have facility hire. So you've got the facilities that you have a boot camp room essentially to play games in. How much does that cost? That costs between anything between, again, there are different kind of boot camps. So I'll reiterate here. You could go to a kind of like an internet cafe if you wanted to, and actually that could be fairly cheap, and it could be £100 a day or something, all the way up to super. You have absolutely everything. It could be £1,000 a day, and you might have the best kit everywhere. Some people charge more because of different locations, or they generally need to charge more for their business model or whatever it may be. We actually at Pracrums, we do a fairly cheap rate. I'd say we do it at £204 a day. Sometimes in peaks we do more at 285. So actually it's more like 340 in peak actually, but yeah, so there's a bit of range. Generally we try and keep this to £204 a day for the facility hire. We have quite a few rooms. Our model isn't reliant on just the boot camps. We have the media, we have other aspects as well. So we try and keep it, because we always had the issues when we were kind of like going through the grassroots scene of how expensive it is. So we wanted to build something which was actually kind of affordable. So we've got facilities, you've got accommodation. This is a big one. It depends whether you are in a major city. So if you're in London, for example, it could be £200 a day per person per room, for a hotel, which is very expensive. If you think about doing a week boot camp for 6 people, if everyone wants individual rooms, you can end up spending a fortune on that. Whereas where we're in Sheffield, for example, you can get hotels for £50 a day per person, or even £60, and you can share rooms as well if you need to keep that cost down. We have apartments. We generally charge £144 a day for 3 people, per 3 people or 4 people. So that varies quite a lot. I'd say in terms of where we do a day cost here, if you've got a team of 4 people with the smaller teams, it could range from, maybe you could go to that £144 a day, all the way up to, if you're in London and you want individual rooms, you could easily be spending £1,500 a day. So that does vary quite a lot. And then we have outside of accommodation and facilities, the next big one was also travel. So this is quite important. Depends where in the world you're flying to and from. Let's say you're a UK boot camp and you're UK players, it could be pretty cheap. But if you're flying players from all over the world, you've got bags included. That was always the stinger for us as a organization growing up. You're like, right, these costs are roughly this. Oh, forget about the bags, and it doubles the flights. But travel can cost you anywhere probably from about £500 a team up to could be 20 grand. Who knows? I was 20 grand. Because again, if you've got teams coming from Brazil or from Argentina or other places in the world, which we have, Australia, we've had a bunch of teams from, they're not cheap flights to fly a whole team over. What teams often try and do with this is they try and get, I'll just add that as TOs to pay. So often, and often you can get this with the facilities as well and accommodation. If a tournament organizer wants the best team in the world to play in their event, and that's the reason why they're over in the UK or the reason why they're over in Europe in general, then the tournament organizer will pay for them to be there. So they'll give them a stipend to do all this. And that's where we get, a lot of our business is through people who've got events, and often it's paid for by tournament organizers. So travel, and then we've got food budget. I'd say this is one of the other big budgets. I've seen a variety over the years of food budgets for different people, ranging from no food budget at all for players to probably around, we'd say like £15 a day is the bare minimum, but some go up to, even like £60 a day kind of thing. So per day, per person. So you can imagine, again, I think the medium here is around the 20, £25 mark, £25 mark, but some are generous and probably do 40 or 50, a lot of them do. And you can imagine if you had a £40 budget, for example, for food, times 6, that's 200, times, that's 240, sorry, times 7, like if it's a week's boot camp, you're already at nearly £2,000 just on food. So the costs do add up quite a lot here. So that's how much it costs to do a boot camp generally. They're the main costs. And it will range from a few thousand to what could cost you 30 grand to do a boot camp, but that's at the very top range. Cool. So let's move on. So a boot camp checklist is kind of what we were going for next. So what should you look for? So look for when, I would say, either booking a boot camp or if you want to build one as well, potentially, for example. So what are you looking for when you're booking boot camp? What are the main points I'd say are location. So location wise, why are you going to a boot camp in the UK or a boot camp in Germany or whatever it is, or boot camp in NA? Are you playing an online event and you want to be there? The ping then matters as well. If you're playing an online event, are you playing a LAN event in that country and you want quick access? So let's say you've got a big stadium event, you don't want to then have to travel from America to the stadium event the day before and be jet lagged. You want to kind of settle yourself in that country for a little bit and so on. So yeah, price, obviously we just discussed that. That's a huge one right now for organizations who are struggling to monetize in the esports world. So price is obviously a huge one. Can it be sustainable? Equipment, so PCs / equipment. Is the PC equipment good enough to run the game that you're playing? That's obviously a really important question. People will get especially annoyed if it's not. I think it also varies. If you're playing a LAN event and you're going to, the PC equipment matters only slightly less because you're training for that event. Whereas if you're playing the online event and the big event is actually online at that facility, it matters a lot more. But PC equipment is obviously a big one. And that's actually a red flag I'll talk about later in terms of how people treat the PCs. So 24/7 access. So does the bootcamp have 24/7 access? It seems like a basic thing that actually the vast majority don't. A lot of them will actually kick you out at a certain time for security reasons or for staffing or for maybe they share the building with other companies and they're not allowed to do that, or universities have this huge issue. If they try to do boot camps, they can never do 24/7 access, really. So this is actually a big one, 24/7 access, because gamers like to play. Some of them will like to start early at 7 a.m. or 6 a.m. They're keen to get going, whereas some of them like to play till 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. and they cross paths in the middle of the night. But we kind of have someone playing at all times of the day in our facility. It's kind of crazy. So network, well, internet really. That's backup line, right? So we talked about that story. We talked about that story at the start where our bootcamp internet went down on I think it was Sunday morning, and we had to basically ship everyone to my flat. Well, back then in a different bootcamp room we only had one leased line, and these things always happen on a Sunday. Sometimes uptime is always 99.9%, but occasionally an internet will always go down. There's nothing you can really do about that. So do you have a backup line where you can switch to a different provider and kind of try and minimize that risk of internet going down? So currently we now have 2 leased lines and we can switch between those within a second. It makes it really easy. And you kind of have like fall off lines as well if they go down. So that's quite an important one. Visas, can all your players actually get into the country? And language, we're English speaking nation. If you were to go to say Spain, are your players comfortable with everyone speaking Spanish around you? Although bearing in mind a lot of people still speak English and so on, but some people like to be in an environment where they speak the same language, especially if you're spending a long time there. And then outside of that, yeah, I mean, food is obviously still an important one, because if you hate the food and you're there for a long period of time, never that great. So it'd be good to talk a bit about red flags. And we kind of talked to that as we go through, but if you've got no backup line, definitely red flag. If you have no, so we'll do here, red flags, that one. 24/7 access, if you haven't got that, again, I think is a red flag. PCs clogging up, so we'll talk about a bit about. I've spoken to some players in the past and they've been like, yeah, we just came from a boot camp and there was, 10 large games like downloaded on that PC. And, they're, only playing one of those. But if the PCs are just clogged up with stuff, it can make them run so much worse. So we actually have in-house kind of like software where we re-image the PCs every single time that a player uses it. So a player will stay with us for a week, they'll go, we'll re-image the PCs completely, the next team joins and it's a fresh PC. It might mean we have to re-download the games and so on. We use cache for that as well. But it makes the PCs run much smoother and last for longer as well. So it's always a good thing. And there are other red flags, obviously, like with visas, if you can't go, big red flag. Unfortunately, the UK sometimes struggles with that. So I hope that gives you an idea of what boot camps are like in the UK. I apologise for my throat; it seems to be a bit croaky today, and I'm coughing away. But if you if you enjoyed this and you want to learn more about the esports industry, follow along. We're going to do more videos on this, and yeah, hope you enjoyed. See you in the next one.